Lord, we thank you what you're about to do to the prophet. Lord, bless him, Lord. We just thank you for him. We just thank you for his family, for making a sacrifice that he can be here with us today, Lord. Bless his whole family in Jesus' name. Amen.
Lord, I just want to say I love you. My voice soars freely to your waiting ears. Now that I've sinned, let me sing to you the song I feel and bring to you as the fruit of my lips I yield. And with my song I serenade you, and with my fingers move across melodic strings. My joy now wells up and dances as a fountain here before you. Lord, I adore you. Let your mountains with their peaks reflect your setting sun. Let the rising surge now bring your brother for you. Let everything with breath now breathe your holy name. And say, Jesus, Lord, I adore you. Let your mountains with their peaks reflect your setting sun. Let the rising surge now bring your brother for you. Let everything with breath now breathe your holy name. And say, Jesus, Lord, I adore you. I catch the upward wind that you send to lift me high. My troubles seem like specks as they're upon the ground they lie. I look into your eyes so true as you take my soul and you make it new. The upward wind has lifted me to you. The upward wind has lifted me to you. Folks, as we flow along in word and song, there'll be an occasional pause for a personal prophetic encouragement, and I underscore encouragement. You know, we get beat up and gashed and dinged up enough on the outside. God's folks don't need to come together as his house and get floppy. Lord knows we've all got flesh issues, but they don't need to be public, not through me. God has a way of keeping those things as private as possible as he's dealing unto healing with us. So what I would have to say public would be for edification, that's to build up. That underscores the new you, who you are in Christ. Edification, exhortation, that stirs up, that inspires. It's a gentle stoking of the inner fire. You might say, well, there's no fire in me to be stoked. I understand that too. I know what it is to feel reduced to ashes, and the Lord has a way with his loving breath blowing across those and causing embers to form again. Edification, exhortation, and comfort. That's a soothing hug from Abba, from Daddy Lord. Soothing balm of Gilead. Sometimes it's just a Abba hug that kind of, with chiropractic healing, pops us into place where our soul needs just alignment with his grace.
Hallelujah.
So child of the Lord, and sing a song. Lift up your eyes, behold the dawn. Let every fiber of your being be refreshed in his presence.
not absurd that a personal word can be sung. Prophetic lyric rides on the melody. First word. The young man in the green hat back here. What's your first name?
Paul.
Paul. Definitely a call in your life, Paul. You're one of these guys who's obviously out of the box, but not out of his mind. Don't let anybody tell you different. Oh, there's rhythms and melody that beats in your heart. There's a song in your heart. There's creativity. And the Lord will bless your musicianship with the invasion of his fellowship. God is showing up and showing himself to you and giving you inspiration and revelation of the King. It will ignite your heart with creativity, and a new song you will sing and bring. Marvelous work going on in your life, Paul. God bless the continuation of that. You're right on course. What's your name? Robert, being fashioned as a leader in the household of the Lord. Lord teaching you to be supportive and serving, which you are. But there's a gentle intuitiveness to you. You're learning to look into folks' hearts and see their need, where they've been inwardly gashed and where they bleed. And learning how to minister, confident hearing the shepherd's voice within you as he leads. You're learning and you're coming along. What's that? Your name's Dominic? That's a great name, Dominic. You'll prophesy at an early age. You'll sense the presence of the Lord and receive supernatural faith and be able to believe him for what man calls the impossible. He didn't hear that without honor. You know, the Lord has a way of speaking to us in triads of truth. That is, three truths that are kind of in a certain kind of weave. Ecclesiastes says a three-pronged cord is not easily broken. Let me give you an example of that. When the Lord gives us a revelation of the righteousness that we have in Christ, it's apart from works. It's the bestowal of grace. We've been positioned in the grace that's been provided by his perfect performance and not our own. Grace becomes a revelation. When we embrace that in our heart dependently and we declare and confess it, then it becomes an operation as God works in us both to will and do his good pleasure. But it calls for our cooperation of obedience to the Spirit. And he might just say, hey, lighten up and trust me. Have you called so-and-so lately? Don't get down that critical path. You know it's toxic. Forgive that old offense that's coming to mind. And just be reminded that I love you with a Father's passionate love. And just harmonize with it, agree with it. That's obedience to the Spirit. It's not like religious legalism. Religious legalism adheres to a system and tries to do the next 10 things ahead of us. Obedience to the Spirit just responds and wraps our heart around the sight and sound of what he's doing and lines up in action and attitude. But that's the triad of the truth of righteousness. It's a revelation of righteousness bestowed by grace. As we rely and confess it, it becomes an operation of his working within. It calls for our cooperation of obedience to him. That's a triad truth of righteousness. That's not what we're dealing with this evening, but it's just an example for this afternoon. We're going to consider a triad of truth that is a weave of three intermission truths that help to keep us on course, on purpose, and on line with his direction divine, and to keep us from getting out into the North 40 or God knows where. But even if we do, God does know where and is able to retrieve us. Been there, done that a time or two. but a triad of truth that keeps us on course. And as we begin to develop a focus and a passion on what I'm about to say, it'll tend to set our compass needle and keep it riveted on the true north of the morning star, which is Him. Number one, the Lord would give us a passion to know Him in ever-increasing intimacy. Number two, to make Him known in heightened effectiveness, knowing Him, making Him known. And to be processed, to be like Him in action and attitude as we move forward. To know Him and make Him known, and to be processed, to be like Him in attitude and action in our soul. We're already like Him in His Spirit. And somebody might say, well, that's easier said than done. And listen, I say, I understand. So the Lord has a way of fueling us forward by His grace and keeping us on course with the flow and force of knowing Him, making Him known, and being conformed to His image. He fuels us as we would pause and do what I call personal altar building. We're going to give some hallelujah, how-tos, and word and song. It's going to be spiked and spiced with personal prophecy. But personal altar building are those settings. They become revelation stations of visitation and seeing His face with the eyes of our heart in greater clarity and being recharged and renewed forward down to this wonderful path of knowing Him, making Him known, being conformed to His image. You give me songs in the night till the morning light breaks in on me. Darkness gives way to the light of the day. You promised I'd see. Meanwhile, with a smile, in the dark I hearken to your voice and rejoice at the sound of your song in the night. And rejoice at the sound of your song in the night. Sweet song. And rejoice at the sound of your song in the night. What's your name? Harriet. Just a heart toward God. A heart toward God you have, and a soul that's poetic. Oh, you have a way of just seeing Him and delighting in Him. You know, your spirit reminds me of Mary of Bethany, who would just sit at His feet, kind of doe-eyed, taking it in. You've been through a lot of hurt and heartache in your time. But the Lord was there all along, restoring your song in the night and bringing it to such a place as this of turning the corner into new beginnings. I saw Him caressing your heart and soul, making you free, thinking with clarity, and making you whole. Particular ones devastated in the domicile of the Lord attacking your household, the Lord gathering up in His arms in response to your prayer and beginning to heal them areas. Lord bless that to you, dear. Got some Kleenex around here somewhere. Here comes a lady right here. Trotting up her leg. So let's consider an example of what it is to build a personal altar. That is, those revelation stations, those fueling stations that fuel us with the force of God's strength that keeps us moving forward on this course of knowing Him, making Him known, and being conformed to Him in attitude and action. In fact, let's check in on Father Abraham, since it's Father's Day. Saying that takes me back to camp meetings with youth of that old song, Father Abraham had many sons. Maybe you didn't know that or were spared that or enjoying that. Some of you are nodding. But Abe would be in his migratory journey in the land of the Canaanite, having been called forth from the Ur of the Chaldees. And God had given him a promise that he would be a father to many nations, as numerous as the sands of the beach and the stars of the sky. and that his wife Sarah, perceived as barren physically, would have a son, and himself perceived as pretty well having had it as a sire. But he wrapped his heart around the sight and sound of this promise and launched out on his forward journey of faith. But every now and then, old Babe, he would pause and build a personal altar. How do you do it? He would start by gathering stones, here a stone, there a stone. And even at that juncture, at that difficult mile, he put those stones in a pile, and he would pour out lavishly water upon them, a real commodity in the desert. And I could just sense them glistening in the desert sun and the visitation and the revelation of the Most High God. Gathering stones, what's that about? I see that as representing various aspects of his life. Hopes and dreams, some disappointments that need to be healed, recognizing certain foul-ups that are under God's forgiveness, certain relationships, some that he's grateful for and some that are a struggle, and sort of gathering collectively all that he has and all that he is, just like Romans 12 says, to present ourselves as a living sacrifice. We got to do it regular, because the problem with the living sacrifice is it keeps crawling off the altar. So he's gathering the stones, the aspects of all that he has and all that he is. All that I have, all that I am, all I will ever be, cannot repay the love that I owe. I surrender to thee. I surrender to thee. I can see Abe picking up a stone. Just want to underscore that promise, Lord, that you've given me. It's not visible yet, this child that you promised. But you're God and you can do it. And I just put this stone there and I just renew my fixation and expectation of faith on you doing what only you can do. Oh, and Lord, sometime it comes to mind that foul up when I lied to Pharaoh about Sarah being my sister because I didn't want him to croak me. Because even in her advanced years, she's still quite a looker. By the way, here's another stone to thank you for that, as a man. Lord, then there's that nephew Lot of mine. He's an okay kid, but my goodness, he keeps getting himself into some deep bandini with his choices. Lord, just help that boy. Help him to get his head screwed on right, and bless his heart, and help me to be patient with him. And there's these Canaanite neighbors of mine. I'll tell you, I see them coming, and it's like my fuse gets short. I mean, these are cousin characters to get along with. Just give me grace and wisdom to negotiate those difficult relationships. And Lord, thank you so much for prospering me materially. Help me to be a sensitive steward to what you give. I just thank you for it. And then Abraham lavishly, generously pours out that wealth in the desert that is water. And I can see the stones glistening and a visitation. The Lord of glory, which becomes a fueling station of grace to continue forward in his ordained journey. The beloved of the Lord shall dwell in safety by him, and the Lord shall cover them all the day long. See, they're right over here in the corner. What's your name? Cheryl. Cheryl. Oh, Cheryl, a prayer warrior, a nurturer, a real mama inside, a love for family, and one who stands as a Deborah, a lioness, in the throne room. You know him well. Lord sees you coming. Look out, hell. He sends angels to dispatch them so missions, to come alongside those young ones and help them along, bring them through the difficulty, the turbulence of life. Ah, but you do it with a heart of expectation. The Lord just transfuse you with His joy of it. And there's a joy that comes forth from that $1 million smile that'll encourage others in their difficult times. And what I'm doing, folks, is underscoring who you are in Christ. And yeah, there may be hurts and pains that we all have, but the Lord comes along with the salve, healing and encouragement, edification, exhortation, and comfort. A bunch of years ago, it was back in 1981, I was on pastoral staff in Ventura, California. Now, here, since 1991, my wife and I hail from Boise, Idaho. That's been our home, and traveling all over the western U.S. We've lived in a lot of places, I'm here to tell you. We're good at moving. We don't like it very much. We got good at it for doing it so many times, so we haven't had to do it now in quite a while. I think we've got one more move that's coming up. Oh, but that's a stone on the pile. God, we just thank you for your grace. The grace to endure what you know. But I was on pastoral staff in Ventura, and our church was hosting a symposium on praise and worship, kind of a seminar type of gathering, revolving around the themes of praise and worship and the relationship of praise and worship. And I was asked to have a share of the teaching in that. I had a pretty good working knowledge of that, but wanted to put my best foot forward, so I went into my study, and on my desk I got my pile of lexicons, Greek and Hebrew dictionaries, and various translations of the Word. And I'm thinking, how do I dig my way out of this? I'm going to start by listening to a couple of cassettes. This was 1981. That was the technology of choice then. And I've got a couple on praise and worship by two of my favorite teachers. Here's one by Jack Hayford, and the other by Judson Cornwall. Jack at the time was the pastor of Church on the Way in Van Nuys, California, and I used to catch his pastoral conferences every year in the early fall. And he's a man of just, there's a gentle kind of patriarchal dignity if you've ever heard him speak, and just his economy of words. He can take a sentence and turn it into a paragraph. Then there's Judson Cornwall. Judson passed on to be with the Lord a few years ago, but he was the pastor of Santa Clara Assembly in Eugene for a number of years, and then traveled on the road ministering on praise and worship. It's now a CD series, The Song of Solomon. Is the best I ever heard on this subject. So I'm going to listen to these two guys and hear what they have to say. I'm going to draw from them. And so I put Jack's tape in, and Jack starts off by saying, praise rises out of worship. And he extrapolates it. Okay, I get with that. Let's listen to Judson. Judson says, we praise our way into worship. I thought, what's going on? I got two of my heroes of the faith at loggerheads. Now that'll happen sometime. Now, of course, there's nothing like the home cooking we get from our pastor. I love our pastor's teaching of our home church in Boise. But there'll be other ministries, kind of in plural, that I'll listen to. And sometime they'll seem to disagree a bit. And sometime I just need to hear them out, and the Lord resolves it. But sometime, like good people do, they just flat out go yes. I got a couple of them, my favorite teachers. They disagree on one particular area, but it's fine. I get so much out of both of them. So I'm listening, and I say, Lord, hey, Lord, get me on track. Who's right? Judson or Jack? And he said they both are, through an impression. And he begins to show me. He said, when Jack says praise rises out of worship, he's speaking of just the act of yieldedness, the gathering collectively of all that we are as stones, presenting it to the Lord, and the Lord renews our minds, and there's a certain momentum in our renewed thinking, and we are released to lavishly explode and express praise. It rises out of that worshipful act. But having done that, it's like we cruise into the deliciousness of God's presence, the very atmosphere of the worship of heaven that we participate in. As we go from worship to yielded act of presenting ourselves, we move forward in the momentum of renewal. We explosively, lavishly, generously express praise, and then cruise restfully into the deliciousness of His manifest presence, where worship becomes the very atmosphere that we abide in. And we'll experience it at varying degrees and depths. I'll just take it anywhere I can. And I found that I can build personal altars when I'm in a vast wasteland of desert between Reno and Winnemucca. Like you're wondering the deep theological question, is there life after Reno, you know? Is there life in Reno? Yeah, there is. You have to look for it. That's one of the few places that historically has never had a visitation. But there's some wonderful people that live there, pray there. So, I'm pondering this and I'm thinking, you know what? Worship, praise, worship. I'm going to go down to the beach and contemplate this. Our home in Ventura was just a quarter of a mile from the beach. So I drove down and I found a sizable piece of driftwood that had washed up on the beach. And I kind of plopped my posterior down there, and I've got my travel mug with my favorite Java Jolt in it. And I'm sitting there and sipping my coffee, and I'm looking out into the water. And have you ever had it when you think your mind is wandering and you're in an ADD mood, but it's just an excursion the Lord's taking you on? And sometimes it's just wandering. But sometimes we're just kind of cruising off down memory lane, and the Lord just meets us there, just in a routine kind of mental journey, like the disciples. He's going to take them for a midday snack through the wheat field. And they're plucking wheat and popping it in their mouth, and it turns out to be a life lesson on what it is to die to ourselves and be alive to Him and see our seed become harvest. I can imagine the disciples saying, gosh, we thought we were just here for a wheat snack. This is some kind of teaching. I'm sitting there looking out into the water, folks, and I recall the previous summer. Now, this is November of the year of 1981. And I remembered body surfing. I'd be out there solar plexus deep in the water, and I'm watching those waves form. It looks like a good one. And it begins to move toward me, and I get on line with it, looking over my shoulder, and push off the bottom, swim like crazy. And you begin to harmonize your energy with that wave, and then you become a human torpedo. You just don't work at all. You just cruise in the momentum, and you come in for a landing in the velvety sand there. You wisely pick the place where there's no rocks. And I'm thinking, Lord, that was such a great time last summer. And He says, look more closely. Do you notice how that wave is bunching up in a swell, just kind of like the pile of rocks? It's sort of presenting itself, and it's stationary, but then it begins to move forward with a certain momentum. But then it lavishly, generously erupts into surf. It's like lacy chiffon, and it catches the spectrum of rainbow colors from the sun, and it is lavish, spectacular in its expression, and then it comes gently crashing down and cruises into the embrace of the sand restfully. I said, wow, worship, I yielded that. Coming together at the swell, moving forward in momentum, the generous and lavish expression of praise, and the coming into the restful atmosphere of its destiny there in the embrace of the sand. Worship, praise, worship.
Praise the Lord.
Wow. Wow. The parable of the wave. So I lift adoring hands as I sing before your throne with your love's consuming fire. Make light to me, your home. With the incense of my heart, my own passion let's proclaim, holy, holy is the Lamb, holy, holy is your name. King of kings and Lord of lords, breathe in glorious wings of praise, holy, holy is the Lamb, ruler the ancient of days. Jesus, you have down to me that I may flow triumphantly. My soul is healed, my spirit's free. Your will to do, your face to see. The flowing river of your life heals wounds of fleshly strife, blending now with joyous springs, deliverance flows, creation sings. Regal high and lifted up, rapturous in your flowing robes, crowning light and healing grace. I take your hand, I see your face. What's your name right here? Anthony. Learning to receive the love of God. You know, you're a tender, contemplative kind of guy, Anthony. The Lord's going to cause you to become a visionary. That means you see spiritual realities with the eyes of your heart. At times you'll have dreams that the Lord produces in your acts. He's ministering a peace to you where there's been a lot of turmoil. And they're coming into this settled sense of His love for you. That He loves you as is, with the ability to transform you, and He's doing transformation. You got a good sense of humor. It's kind of a one-liner gift of droll, what you got. And it'll take you a ways and help people to digest what you're saying, Anthony. God continue to bless you. We can be sitting there minding our own business, and the Lord speaks up for us with a word. He's done it to me before I've been able to receive it into this kind of stuff. Now I'm going to turn a corner with what I've got here, and I am going to use the art of storytelling. Storytelling is an art form. In fact, the Lord is restoring the arts to the church. I got a couple of them that are getting ready to do some dinner theater. They'll move the chairs and set up tables and serve some food. And one of the gals, in fact, it's a church in Idaho, but she's from California. She's been a scene designer, script writer. One of the other gals, several of them with dramatic ability. And one lady with a tremendous ability in the dance. She's been a dance instructor in her time. Some of the guys, and that's their vision there. I know a couple of them that are looking at that. There's a whole new wave of cinematographic arts that are waiting in the wings that are starting to come forward. More innovation yet with music coming. There's a whole entrepreneurial group of business people that are creative thinkers in the realm of business, God giving them ideas out in the marketplace, and Jesus is mentoring now. Jesus was a businessman for a lot longer than he was a public minister. Although ministry certainly would have gone forth in his business operation as a carpenter. There is a whole breed of servant leader that the Lord wants to bring forth. Promotion in the political realm, as they humble themselves before him, and he will exalt them as only he can do. It's kind of like lights going over the city of dusk. You don't see too much of it, but they're starting to go on. Art forms, drama. There's somebody sitting right here. You've got ability in the dramatic. And it can be portrayed with just a two-person kind of dialogue. There was a lady I knew in Ogden, Utah, that did a one-person kind of soliloquy on the woman at the well. It was just a marvelous thing, just enthralling. In fact, she's a professional actress. You'll see her show up in character actor parts on TV every now and then. You know, Donna and I'll be watching a TV show. Hey, there's Rebecca. Storytelling. There's a storytelling festival that occurs annually just south of Salt Lake City in Timpanogos. And my wife Donna and her friend Jolene usually go down and turn it into a 2-night slumber party. They watch that. And there's starting to be the sprinkling of spiritual salt in those things. So I'm going to take, by way of further illustration, this principle that I've shared, and I'm going to do it in the form of a story. I'm going to take a passage from Scripture, a couple of passages. It talks about the same lady. You'll know who she is as the story unfolds. I'm going to give her a name and a history. You don't find it in the Bible, but I'm going to take a little literary license like a script writer who's taking a portion of Scripture and saying, I'm going to translate this into a play or a movie. But I won't subtract from the talking points of the truth at all, but will rather underscore the truth and message of the portion that appears both in Luke's Gospel and Mark's Gospel. And you'll know who she is as the story unfolds. Mira sat on her beautiful veranda in her lounge chair overlooking the teeming town of Bethany. She was a people person. You could see the people passing by, they would wave. Hi, Mira, and she would wave back and flash that patented smile. She was quite a shopper. She loved to go on shopping soirees in the town, and she had wealth, but she loved to wheel and deal with the shop owners. It was kind of an R&R with her, and she would get together just some lovely items that would be part of the decor of her home, love to host people, gift of hospitality, especially young married couples. They knew who she was, the shop owners. They'd see her come through the door and they'd think, uh-oh, it's another mental match with wit and wisdom and charming and cunning. And they would usually end up on the short end of it as she would come out with her latest triumph. She would stop and chat with the beggars and press a coin into their hand, and knew them all by name, and they knew her, and she knew each of their sad stories of how they'd gotten to that state. She would often stop and pray and place a hand on their shoulder and speak a blessing from the Torah and the Psalms and the prophets. But she wasn't always like that. 6 years ago, until that time, she'd been rather reclusive, a kept woman, when suddenly her husband, Mordecai, died. A prosperous businessman who left her well heeled, but a marvelous model of example as he walked in accord with the Torah more consistently than any of the scribes or the Pharisees. They despised him. He didn't render craven obeisance to them, but was a model of blessing. The great God of Israel had prospered him. He passed her rather suddenly, and at first she felt like a tree had been wrenched out by the roots that had once covered her and provided fruit for her. It was a void of grief. And she began to cry out and sob to the Lord. Mordecai had so aptly modeled, and he began to show up in his healing presence and bedside manner, and he turned the void of grief into a memory bank. And she began to recall things that he'd said, laughter that they'd had together, and was now fortified by God in her own relationship to walk it out for the rest of her life. As she sat there in her lounging chair, she began to just compose the various aspects of her life, in much the same way Father Abraham had gathered stones. As she just opened her eyes, she looked down at the table to the right of her lounge chair, and there was a beautiful, fragile, handcrafted alabaster box that was filled with pricey spikenard. It would bring a price the sum total of a laborer's annual wage. She looked at it, and she remembered when she purchased it. She passed by the shop of Shoreham the merchant, and she saw it there, and it was almost like it was framed in light. And she said, I've got to have that. I don't know exactly why, but I've got to have it. And she went in and said, I'll pay full price for that alabaster box with the spikenard content. And Shoreham was so surprised, he practically had to lift his jaw off of his chest. But he gave it to her, and she held it close to her breast and scurried home, careful not to stumble. And she placed it on the table right next to her lounging chair. Now she'd awakened from just being deep in pondering the Lord. Her mind was moving forward now renewed. And she recalled that the Galilean was in town, and he was at the home of Simon the leper. She'd heard him many times. The power and the authority that permeated his speech, such a reality with what he had to say. She saw miracles extended from his hands as the health of heaven invaded. This man He withstood the religious elite, and it was like a fresh breeze of the Spirit was causing their house of cards to rise. She recalled how he would speak of his death to come, the resurrection pending. Tear this temple down and the Lord will raise it up in 3 days. She could hear between the lines what he was saying. And she suddenly knew what the spikenard was for. It's to anoint him for burial with the expectation of resurrection. Having presented all that she was, having her mind renewed, she moved forward with the momentum of a wave to the home of Simon. The door was open about 18 inches. She didn't knock, she went right in. Simon looked up and nodded politely. But she interfaced with Jesus, and it's like their gaze locked, and his face broke into a smile as he continued speaking, conversationally teaching, seated at the table. She took her beautiful, handcrafted, fragile alabaster box with the contents of spikenard. She cut a wide arc around him and came up behind him on his left side. And she took the alabaster box in the folds of her beautiful dress, and with the palm of her hand, she gently crushed it just on the top, careful not to spill the contents. And as she did, she sensed a positive breaking, like the lavishness of a wave that comes crashing in sweet submissiveness. And as she poured it out on Jesus' head, and it went down his shoulders and down his face, you could hear many of the crowd just taking in with ecstasy the beautiful aroma of the spikenard. But there was a hornet's nest of religious, rigid critics over here with a buzz saying, this woman, she thinks she's so virtuous and generous, she could have sold that for the entirety of a laborer's wage. Then she could have blessed the poor. That's kind of how the religious mind does when the Lord is being lavishly adored. And that kind of mentality, their ability to reproduce is sewn up. As McCall, David's wife, as she sneered and criticized him as he has before the Lord. I can imagine Jesus standing up, placing a big brother arm around her, looking at her and stroking her cheek. And she could look up into his face and see the blend of the oil, but then intersecting with tears streaming from his eyes and coming down into his smile wrinkles and cascading down his face. And I could see her looking deep into his eyes and she into his, and him saying, thanks, Mira. We know what this is about. And then according to the scriptures, he turns and faces the group in the room, and he says to them, and I'll paraphrase, watch studiously what you've seen. You've seen an example of the pouring out of adoration that will stand forever in time, recorded, and beyond, to be seen, learned from. Praise the name of the Lord. Worship. I yield to that before God. The renewal that comes as the wave moves forward, the lavish expression of praise, and coming into the sweet submissiveness of the very atmosphere of worship. It's not like heaven joins us, but we join heaven. And in a way, heaven has invaded earth. Brad, and I know this is Brad because I met him earlier, so don't think I'm more prophetic than I am. Rising to the occasion, a lot going on in your life. Learning the ways of God's grace and provision in the marketplace. The Lord has caused you to increasingly be as a rock. I know there's probably times when you feel like Jell-O. There's times when I do too, Brad. But there's just a fashioning solidity, a dependable, you can take it to the bank kind of thing that it comes from Brad. You're visionary. He's going to give you ideas, creative ideas, to create wealth that you're going to be a steward over in a sensitive kind of way. Jenny, you have a honey kind of sweetness about you. It's soft. It's honey sweet. It's not saccharine. Lord has a way of combining honey and the rock. An ability to pray and see vision for your children, to see what the Lord is doing and to know how to speak to them and into them, but also a ministry of merciful counsel to others. So child, of the morning sing your song. Lift up your eyes, behold the dawn. Let every fiber of your being be refreshed in His presence. Child of the morning, sing your song. His arm will yoke around your shoulders. Bow down your heart and life begins. Lay down your life and you will see a servant, and your Lord will see your friends. And one of the things I've noticed about the prophetic, it can be served up to a group, a congregation, or it can be selectively served to an individual. But very often, say I was speaking to Harriet earlier, others will hear that, and a slice of that pie sounds like them. Help yourself, it's community property. You know, you're aware of that because you move prophetically. And there's a marvelous restoration and recovery of that prophetic ministry. A lot of seasoning that's gone on and understandings of the visitation of the Lord. I know you've been committed and paid a price that didn't feel nice, but the Lord was there to make up the difference, and with His joy, say it's worth it all to have heard your call. His arm will yoke around your shoulder. Bow down your heart and life begins. Lay down your life and men will see your servant, and your Lord will see your friends. And your Lord will see your friends. And your Lord will see your friends. I know the word of a mama and son that was over here with Cheryl. I could sense that jumping right over to you with a ditto. Yes. The blonde lady that's just looking all over the place at other people. Because you care about other people. You really love to see others encouraged and love to see them come into their own. You've taken some hits in the heart in your time. But I'm telling you what, you're one tough gal. You bounce back. You're spring-loaded. And there's a sense of the very best seasons yet to come. And an ability to minister hope to others. What's your name?
Julie.
Bless you, Julie. You're not out in the tulies, you're in the palm of God's hand. You guys are family. I can tell you enjoy one another. There's a unity of the spirit, but also there's a connectedness of the soul. Knitting together as well. Too tired to fight, too crippled to run. I dreaded seeing each morning sun, yet feared the night with all its memories of terror and pain. Then Jesus came, when I called His name, I clung to His cross, He took my shame, and then He picked up all the pieces of my life. See, way in the back in the cheap seats back here. The brother back here, side looked like he played some football at one time. What's your first name? But you're seated the big guy, and then the smaller guy. But what's your name? Kenny. A mentor with the heart of a coach and a desire to see younger guys and even your generational peers excel in the field of battle. You know what it is to have the house just caved in on you, and for the Lord to dig you out of the rubble and lead you along. He's done much in your life, but you got a heart to give it and a desire to transfer. Sitting next to Kenny is number 77. What's your name? Casey. What is it? Casey. Casey. Obviously a big guy. Then you already got a set of guns there, my goodness, at your age. You got football player written all over you. But there's a softness about your heart too, a tenderness toward the love of God. And a desire to see others encouraged. And the Lord is going to shape you up as a leader in the midst of your generation, Casey. God continue to bless you and bless the relationship that you have. There's just kind of an exchange of just the salve of God's healing. Just a tenderness. Just blesses God. He's delighted with what he sees. Curtis, a prophetic pulse as well as a servant's heart. A desire to just serve wherever you happen to be needed. Something of a hallelujah handyman. But I saw the Lord just at this point just embracing you, and you've been hit with a lot of buckshot of rejection in your time. You know what it feels like. But the tender fingers and hands of the great physician, just taking that out. There was a time when you were so hit with buckshot, they could have dropped you off the pier and you'd have sunk right to the bottom. But the Lord said, I'm not going to let that happen to my man Curtis here. And he began to do soul surgery of plucking that out and some of its outright shafts to rekindle and encourage you ongoingly in your prophetic ministry, as well as the willingness to serve and humble yourself, and a delight in just doing whatever needs to be done that's supportive. But he breathes on what had been ashes. They're once again coming into live coals and a stoking for that fire to come forth, with some opportunities to travel as he brings things, opportunities, windows in your schedule. Blessings on you, my brother. Praise the name of the Lord.
That was good.
All that I am, all that I have, all I will ever be, cannot repay the love that I owe. I surrender to thee. God bless you as he continues to mentor us each and give us a passion to know him, to make him known, and to be processed, to be like him in attitude and action, but often finding the blessed necessity of coming apart for those fresh transfusions of the heart, of building personal altars, the gathering of stones, the coming together as a wave, the presenting of all that we are and all that we have to the best of our knowledge, having our mind renewed and brought with forward momentum, to lavishly pour out as a wave, having our inner alabaster box broken, to pour forth the precious ointment of the very best we have to give, our adoration to him, and cruising restfully into the embrace of his presence as our worship participates with the heavenly host, exalting the King of glory as heaven invades earth. Worship, praise, worship. Revelation, fueling stations as we move forward, knowing him, making him known, and process to be like him in attitude and action. God bless that to your heart, Pastor Kevin.
That was good.
By the way, Kevin and I are going to abide here and be available for personal ministry as long as we need to be. I've got no place else to go this evening. I purposely didn't schedule an evening service to have that kind of availability. But I so appreciate you guys as a family unit in the Lord. You know, there's so much diversity here. That, you know, there's not any uniformity. It's harmony. It's diversity orchestrated by one spirit. And there's just a special kind of family setting. This is kind of like the Father's family. So God continue to bless you in that regard.
Praise the Lord. How many was blessed by all that? Yeah.
Amen.
Oh yeah, and that's on. That has been recorded live on our Ustream channel, and also we'll have DVDs. And thank you, Dick. That was just. We just had that was really some good revelation. I like that 3-chord Strand said, I'm gonna really think about that, brother. Praise the Lord. I want to invite Jaime up here, and he's going to pray over the offering. We just want to give you an opportunity to sow into a real fruitful ministry, and I really believe that this brother, he is blessing people all around the country, and we want to send him off with a good offering today, and I want to thank you guys for coming out today as well. Go ahead, Jaime.
Heavenly Father, Lord, we're grateful, Father God, for all that you give us, Father God, all that you do for us, Father God. I thank you, Father God, for their offerings, Father God. I ask, Father God, you will bless them and multiply them, Father God. You will put them in high places, Father God, so they can be the example for the next generation. And I also ask, Heavenly Father, for those that don't have a job, Father God, the doors have been shut in their face. I ask, Lord, that you will open those doors, Father God. You will bless them, Father God. You will double their pay. In Jesus' name.
Our brother's going to help you out there, brother. And praise the Lord. Hallelujah. Jesus. Let's go ahead and